Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Memorial Day. I really can't even say that, can I? Because Memorial Day in the US was celebrated almost a week ago as I'm filming this. But anyway, this is my last AM reading wrap-up of May, because I'm on the last day of May 2024. So there we go. That means something. It's been a very hectic week, in fact, so I'm kind of glad to be here, but I can't be here for long because the hecticness continues. Earlier this week, I had to, rush to complete the BookTube prize to get my ballot in on time. I also had this big move to do at work where we were changing work locations, and somebody who reports to me lost his ID badge, so we have to deal with that as well. And now this weekend's also going to be really busy. I have a wedding reception to attend, which is really nice, and then I'm also singing in a concert the next day. Luckily, just going back and forth between Baltimore and DC, so there's that. So that's what's on my mind, and I worry a little bit that I was a bit distracted this week as I was trying to cram in some reading. I'm just going to talk briefly about a little bit of it now. So as always with these videos, I'm going to start by discussing a short story. I am currently reading stories from Pembrooke Magazine's issue number 55. And this week I read a story called Consuela by Jennie Rathbun, which I really liked. This story, I don't know, it feels familiar. I'm not sure if I read this somewhere else before or if it's just a familiar trope. It starts with this wealthy, sort of bored housewife living in a upper-class, largely white suburb. Her name is Isabella. She's childless, she's in her 40s, she doesn't have a job, and she's just recently moved there from New York with her husband. And so she's kind of looking for a way to belong and to feel like she's part of something. And so she ostensibly belongs to a friend group, and they ostensibly are liberal and, it takes place during the Trump era, and they're disgusted by Trump's policies, and one thing that comes up is separation of immigrant families in camps and cages and that sort of thing. But for the most part, at least their ringleader, Brooke, is critical of them, saying, we talk a good game and we have, placards in our yards, but we don't really do anything to help anyone else. And so this is what Isabel is thinking about, and she's, just thinking about, wanting to do better and how lonely she is, and she comes across a sobbing Latinx woman sitting at a bus stop who introduces herself as Consuela. She has a thick accent from Honduras, undocumented immigrant who got fired from her job as a housekeeper because the bus was always late. And so Isabel decides to do, the smart thing of hiring this woman, completely on the spot. And from the off, it's obvious that there's, something, a little off about Consuela's story, that, maybe she's not exactly who she says she is. I don't know, I tend to spoil these stories in these reading videos. I don't think many people are going to pick up this issue of Pembroke Magazine and want to, read it for themselves. Although, in this case, I really did like this story. I thought there was some interesting things in here. The commentary on virtue signaling and on how Isabel was using Consuela as a way to get in with the in crowd. And so, there's a selfish part of trying to do good by other people. Not to say exactly that I think Isabel's actions are completely in the wrong here, but I feel like that, I don't know, it does get into the complications of what people are trying to do with activism. In a way, I wish Consuela herself had somebody do that to her when we realize who she really is, maybe to have someone judge her for how she judges others. I don't know, that's just me in a way, going for the underdogs of the story, because at the end I feel like Consuela's not really the underdog of the story. And I also, I always get antsy about, how people are portrayed, but I do feel like in this story, Rathbun, in a very concise story, takes people as complicated, that nobody here necessarily is all good or all evil. So, that's just a big thing for me that, allows me to consider these issues and realize the author isn't telling us to, hate on a specific person as, the devil of the story. Although I do have to say, ultimately, I feel like, Isabel, her actions encouraged her friends to join activist groups, like, people who collect food for the homeless, or, just to help out with, nonprofit groups, which technically feel like it's maybe a better step, maybe a more verifiably good step for humanity, I would argue, perhaps, rather than just hiring someone off the street because you feel bad for them. This might be an interesting story really to talk about with a book club or something, especially because it is very nice that it's also a readable story, and she's not trying to, the author isn't trying to, go into any literary hijinks with this one, or writing hijinks. So yeah, again, I enjoyed this. The other two books I'm going to talk about, I listened to both of them on audio, digitally. So the first one I will mention is JUMPNAUTS by Hao Jingfang. This science fiction book was actually on my anticipated reads list that I made at the beginning of the year. I'd read one of Jingfang's earlier science fiction stories, and I thought it was an intriguing premise. I kind of had mixed feelings about where she went with it, but I also, figured it'd be nice to continue my foray into Chinese science fiction, especially after I just recently watched the Three Body Problem adaptation on Netflix, and I'm actually hoping one thing I can cram into the next few days is writing a review of that. But anyway, so JUMPNAUTS takes place about 100-ish or a little less years in the future. And the world is divided into sort of an Atlantic League and a Pacific League. I'm not saying the names exactly correctly, but that's basically where we are. But the characters we're following, they're all part of the Pacific League. They're all Chinese nationals. The first character is Jiang Lu, who is the youngest son of a very prominent sort of Bitcoin cryptocurrency family who has a lot of clout in the world, although not necessarily a lot of respect for their doings and how they make their money. But Jiang is interested in some pulsar radiation near Earth, and so he befriends this unusual woman, I suppose, who's looking into it. Her name is Yun Fan, and she's an archaeologist, and she has knows a lot of history about Chinese culture going back, through many dynasties, and basically, in a way, her work at the museum is a front to sort of protect and study these artifacts, and she has this rather crazy hypothesis that aliens have come down to Earth, several times in the past and have helped ancient civilizations, including Chinese civilizations, along their path to, further knowledge in science and other things. And she has kind of gotten this mission passed down from her family, kind of like, National Treasure sort of stuff with Nicolas Cage. And they're expecting alien contact, and the pulsars are sort of confirming that there's going to be another alien contact soon, and they want to meet these aliens. And there's a third character, Qi Fei, who is a member of a Chinese military organization and has a history with Yun Fan, and he joins them as well as they commandeer one of Jiang Lu's family spaceships, as you do in, the latter 21st century, to go and meet with the aliens. The first part of the story is kind of, eye-rolly, that it really does turn into, it feels like, melodramatic soap opera of the two men competing over Yun Fang, who, for her part, really is mostly interested in her family mission and not in them at all. Or at least not to the extent that they are with all of their, overblown, buffoonery and trying to impress her and take out each other. And then we get to the alien parts, and, it's interesting, and it kind of confirms that, yes, aliens have helped us and helped different cultures along, and as a Western reader, it's very, enlightening to hear about this from, a Chinese perspective, to hear, this culture I'm not as familiar with, but to hear how, to get that insight into, Confucianism and other philosophies that made up, the culture throughout all of these dynasties. And then Ken Liu, actually, who's the translator, he put in like this note before beginning the book about how he was going to intentionally put in a bunch of footnotes to sort of, you know, center readers like me who don't have this, you know, knowledge innately, to, you know, kind of understand more the references these characters are constantly making to Confucius and other ideas, which I thought was really intriguing and helpful and maybe like an interesting step when it comes to translation. And in fact, I just listened to an interview with Jessica Cohen, who's a very prominent translator into Hebrew, and she talked about how in different cultures footnotes are more accepted, and in English and in American books, you know, technically for fiction, usually there aren't footnotes, but in other cultures it's more okay, and I'm starting to think maybe footnotes are a nice idea to get that extra cultural layer of what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to continue talking over a vacuum cleaner you may or may not be able to hear outside my condo unit. But yeah, I thought that stuff, you know, the cultural stuff was pretty fascinating, but I thought that the characterization was relatively facile, and the ending felt, I don't know, a little abrupt. But at the same time, it was so much more hopeful, and like to compare it to Cixin Liu's, you know, Three-Body Problems series, which is actually rather nihilistic in a lot of ways, and his whole hypothesis, which is, you know, real in hard science, and both of these books also deal in hard science. But Cixin Liu's, you know, hypothesis is ultimately pretty pessimistic, that, you know, about, you know, alien contact and cultures that are going to be clashing with one another for dominance. And in this book, I guess to be spoilery, it is a little bit more about, at least when it comes to the aliens and us, a little bit more about cooperation and, you know, them helping us along in a way. So that's kind of nice to hear on its own. But in general, I thought there was a facile style to the characterization, and maybe to some of the translation as well. So I thought, you know, I like it, but it's not completely for me. And the final book I will mention just briefly is The House of Doors by Twan. This is also technically Chinese-inspired fiction. The author is a Chinese man who lives in Malaysia, and the book is actually a retelling of sorts of W. Somerset Maugham's sojourn into what was then colonial British Penang, and the exploits he was following there to try and collect and tell some of his famous stories, because he was a famous playwright and author of that time period. And this is sort of putting him in the seat of having somebody tell his story. And so it is actually quite different if you, you know, look at my video that I did a couple of months ago, and I gave my assumptions about what I thought this book was about. I think I was fairly off the mark for this book and some of the other books I read in the last 2 months for the BookTube Prize. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard a couple of years ago in 2019, and the point is for the literary book community to come together to judge the best of literary fiction and nonfiction published in the US the year before, and we whittled down long lists of 48 books. We take 4 rounds to whittle them into winners and runners-up in both divisions. And so we just finished the quarterfinals round, which is round 2, and I was reading fiction Group C. So I pit this book against 5 others, and my vote will get, you know, averaged out with all the other judges in my ballot, and 3 of the 6 books will go on to the semifinals starting next month. So during the round and the judging, we're not really supposed to talk about our thoughts about the books, not to influence each other or anything, but again, I did make a preliminary thoughts video where I feel like I intentionally only took a very quick look at what the books were about, and sometimes came up with some kind of crazy conclusions that were a little off the mark, but it was a little fun. And if you'd like to see that video, I'll link it down below, and I also have more information on the BookTube Prize linked down below. So that about covers it for me now. The vacuum outside is reminding me that I do need to move on with my day here. But I do hope to be back after I get back from this weekend. I'll be back on this channel to again address the BookTube prize because Robert will be putting up, you know, the winner's announcement video. And it'll be exciting. Then I'll finally be able to share my official thoughts on the 6 books on my ballot. So stay tuned for that. I hope all of my other fellow judges have certainly got their ballots in by this point. Poor Robert, I know, has probably had to nudge some people. And that they enjoyed their books. I can't wait to hear about them. And I'd love to hear what everyone else is reading as well. I'd also perhaps like to take a little bit of a break from my life for a little bit, but I'm not sure that can happen. But thankfully, hopefully books will once again be a place for me that's sort of a refuge from craziness elsewhere. So yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.